You're listening to the Careers BU podcast, a podcast aimed at Bournemouth University students and graduates. Each episode, we talk to employers, alumni and professionals all about their career journey, what employers are looking for, and help you explore the opportunities that are available to you. Welcome to today's episode. I'm your host Amanda Fripp, Careers Consultant at BU. Joining me today is Emily Robbins, a BU graduate who studied Social Anthropology and went on to pursue a Masters of Research. Emily currently works as a Resettlement Manager for East Devon District Council. Emily shares her journey from academia to the professional world, discussing how she strategically sought out opportunities during her studies to align with her interests and develop skills relevant to her desired career path. Tune in as Emily sheds light on her role and offers valuable insights into navigating the transition from education to employment. Hi Emily, welcome to the podcast. Could you just introduce yourself and your current role for me, please?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Emily Robbins. I am currently the Resettlement Manager at East Devon District Council.
Excellent, thank you. So you studied at Bournemouth University, didn't you? What did you study?
So my undergraduate was in Social Anthropology, and then I did a Masters of Research afterwards.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the episode and kind of what you got out of those degrees and masters. But what's really interesting is to find out about your role. So you're a resettlement manager in East Devon Council.
Yeah.
So what does a resettlement manager do?
So I am responsible for between 3 to 4 different resettlement schemes. So resettlement is effectively when a refugee or where there's kind of a global crisis, perhaps there's a conflict, a war, or a natural disaster, our government will open certain levels of resettlement schemes, and they effectively allow safe passage to come and live in the UK and have varying levels of support and also various levels of access to our social systems, including universal credit or the NHS or education. And so I am in charge of, or I supervise the Home to Ukraine scheme, which is for Ukrainian refugees, which started in 2022. The Afghan Relocation and Assistance Policy, which is open for people who are fleeing from Afghanistan following the Taliban attacks. The ACRS scheme, which is the Afghan Citizenship Assistance Policy. So the first Afghan scheme is for people who were working with the British government when the Taliban invaded, and the second is just for Afghan citizens who may be more vulnerable because of certain characteristics, for example, being part of the LGBTQ community or a woman who's been at risk of domestic abuse. And then I'm also responsible for an asylum hotel. So that's people who haven't been granted any status in the UK, but have legally come over here to claim asylum in the UK. And so overall, I'm responsible for about 700 people within each of those between each of those schemes. We're a relatively small team, so there's me and then 4 resettlement officers who are responsible for providing the wraparound support for people who've come through on those schemes. So that is making sure that they understand effectively how to live and survive in the UK, because we have a very complex system of doing things here. Everything is based around paperwork. We're very email dominated. And so the kind of cultural shock of that can be really difficult for people to integrate. So we signpost people to English learning classes so that people can improve their English. We support providing or people accessing employment, help with CVs. We help people get doctor's appointments, attend doctor's appointments, provide translation services. We also support, what part of our biggest role is finding people suitable and sustainable housing. So we have a kind of a housing crisis at the moment, and so trying to find private rented properties is really difficult. So we run certain incentive schemes for landlords to encourage them to rent to certain demographics or the people that we're supporting. So it's quite a full-on job. It's really interesting, and it's good because you can see the difference that you get to make in people's lives, which is really nice. And it's good when people kind of say, well, I wouldn't have been able to settle here without kind of your support and your help. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of what I do.
It sounds really interesting. And like you said, it sounds like it really does make a difference because, there are people who are fleeing their countries for no, it's not a choice that they're making. This is something they have to do out of necessity, out of safety. And you're actually providing that package of support for them when they come here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk a little bit more about your career journey, but let's just go back to your studying then.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you studied social anthropology and then you went on to do your master's. And Was this an area of interest, kind of working with refugees? When did this area of interest stem from? Was it through your degree?
Yeah, and I think it's difficult when you start a degree to kind of know what could come out at the other end. And I think being open-minded when you start your degree of, you know, what you think you could be interested in. I started my degree thinking that I wanted to go into kind of women's studies, and then kind of shifted around as I started doing more about social policy and migration. So my undergraduate dissertation was on the hostile environment and the effects of the hostile environment policy on asylum seekers. Effectively, the hostile environment makes it more difficult for asylum seekers and refugees to settle in the UK and survive, and it puts up certain barriers. And for me, that was really interesting of how we, as a society and our government, decided to choose to treat certain people, especially as they have particular vulnerabilities. You know, they've suffered trauma and they've been forcibly displaced from their communities and their homes. And kind of following on from that, my undergraduate dissertation opened up a whole area that was quite under-researched, and that was about home, and how you understood and either recreated or could create a home when you had been displaced from somewhere that you associated with home. So through my master's, I did a master's of research, which is effectively a condensed 1-year research project. And I decided to work with refugee women within Bournemouth, volunteering with a charity called International Care Network, who are incredible, and did a kind of small scale study with, I think it was 6-7 refugee women who had settled here on various different resettlement schemes. Quite a lot of them were from Afghanistan and Syria. And that kind of sparked an interest of actually developing and creating a home in the UK is really difficult. And you need the support from people who understand the systems, and understand how to live in the UK to be successful at that. And a big part of making home was understanding and being familiar with the place that you were and understanding the language. And that for me was like, oh, actually this would be a really interesting thing to continue to explore, and also to get some practical experience of, you know, it's one thing writing a paper about it and researching it, but actually being able to be a part of it and supporting people who are going through this and they're on this kind of journey to be settled again, I felt would be a really interesting career path to pursue.
Excellent. So the Masters of Research, that's a master level qualification, but can you just explain the difference between a Master of Research to a kind of Master of Science and Master of Arts?
So Masters of Research are purely based around independent study. So you have very limited contact hours. There's certain sessions that you can log on to find out about qualitative research techniques or build a bit more about how you build a literature review. But ultimately, it's kind of over to you, and you have 2 supervisors, or I had 2 supervisors, you might have 1, and they kind of guide you through the process of starting your literature review. You do quite a lot of reading, all independent reading. You have some chats with them, some supervision, and they kind of help guide where you think you would like to go. And to be honest, at the beginning, I knew that I wanted to study refugees. I knew that I wanted to work and kind of understand perhaps this concept of home, but actually how the project kind of ended up and the research ended up was very much a process of discovery of what could be relevant. And as soon as you start your literature review, you pick out what isn't there, and therefore where your research would sit. So it's, I mean, a science or a Masters of Arts or something like that, you will have a lot more contact time. But I really enjoyed it kind of being my own project and having the independence to decide whatever I wanted to research, however I wanted to do it, with some really good guidance behind me with 2 professionals who, you know, my supervisors had backgrounds working in qualitative research, and one of them had worked with refugees and asylum seekers before, so I was really well guided.
So that Masters of Research really gave you an opportunity to choose what you wanted to research, take that forward and develop that. And then the advantage as well is you then also were, to do that project, you were volunteering and gaining actual real life experience. So was that really beneficial to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think academia is wonderful for giving you quite a lot of different qualifications, but actually volunteering and working in inverted commas in the real world gives so many different skills and an understanding of how, especially for resettlement, how that actually works in practice, because it's such a complex world. Just looking at it from a purely paper perspective doesn't really help, or it does help, but it's limited in what it could give you. And volunteering, you get to meet some really incredible people. You also get the opportunity to kind of help people, or to be a part of something that isn't necessarily what you wouldn't do as a career, or perhaps it's not what you would think about doing as a career. So it's a really good opportunity to learn a lot of different things, and actually you build so many good networks, and that has really helped me in my job now, because I built those connections while I was working and volunteering for this charity. You know, they've come in and done training sessions for my team and that kind of thing. So it's networking is really important, and it does kind of give you the professional network that you need to rely on if you're starting out and you want to ask questions. If you've built up a good relationship when you volunteer, people are always open to helping you, and that's really helpful and invaluable.
And what else did you do whilst you were studying? Because obviously we met whilst you were studying, doing your masters, because you were working in the careers team as well. So can you just explain a little bit about what else you were doing whilst you were studying, which maybe you feel actually also helped you in terms of progression and careers?
Yeah, so I was really lucky in that my undergraduate lecturer offered me a research assistant role on one of her projects, which was working at the time with Albanian young men in Albania to try and highlight how music could possibly decriminalise or support the decriminalisation of young Albanian men. And that was a fantastic opportunity because it's a really unique niche to be able to see into. And the research that I was doing as a research assistant there supported and helped my development on my master's. You know, I got to write an entire literature review that got published, and that was fantastic to kind of just to start that and have a go at, and actually to see what academics do outside of teaching was really interesting, because they all do their own research, they're all working on other projects, and also, again, making those network connections. You know, I've got a connection at an international development firm who I keep in contact with, who works for a company called Palladium. So all of those things, when you're kind of looking for jobs, you can reach out to those people later on and say, oh, actually, do you know of anything? Have you got anything that you think I could be capable of doing? So I did that project. I also got another research assistant role with another lecturer working on digital recordings of refugee women and their experience of settling in a seaside town. So that was a really interesting project as well, and fantastic to work on.
And were those both paid? They're both paid roles, weren't they?
Yeah. So I definitely reach out to your lecturers if you're interested in doing things like that. Tell them, because that's what I did. I just said to all my lecturers, look, I'm really interested in getting into, exploring different options, perhaps going into research, what I thought I wanted to do at that point in time. And so reaching out, they see that you're keen, and that is really important. And there are quite a lot of projects like that, and even just having a go, even if it's not paid, is really good. And to be honest, with students, it's pretty well paid as a student job, which is really good. Obviously, I was working in the career centre as well, so I was a careers champion, which helped with kind of more admin-based skills, which was really helpful because I'd previously worked in childcare, and that was kind of all I did. So I effectively had my master's year to kind of zhuzh up my CV and upskill myself, so that I didn't get caught in working in childcare for the rest of my life, which wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do. So being a careers assistant really helped. And to be honest, getting an understanding of how you support people, the language that you use on your CV, how you write a really good application, like kind of hearing everyone in the office talk about these, made sure that I wrote a really good application when I first applied for my job. And I think, having that, you spell check, you make sure your sentences, all of those little things really stand out when you do CVs. And now, having gone through the hiring process and being reading people's CVs, you really notice the people who have put in the extra work and understand how to write something really well. So I think that helped in a slightly different capacity than volunteering and the research assistant roles, but it was really valuable. So a little recommendations, definitely go and get that help.
Yeah, come to the career service and get support. Excellent. Yeah. Well, yeah, you were often there, weren't you? And you were, you could, and we were talking about applications and stuff like that. So excellent. So you did an awful lot, didn't you? You've done an awful lot whilst you were studying. You really made the most of your time. So then once you graduated, you did your master's, you finished that. Then what happened next? What did you do after that?
So I actually did 2 months in Kosovo as part of a Erasmus program, which was fantastic. I was the education and programs coordinator for a gender summer school in the University of Pristina. So that was, another fantastic opportunity to go and do something abroad, because I really would like to travel and kind of keep my career as international as possible. And again, more experience, being responsible for things, having to kind of get all those buzzwords of being organised and stuff like that. And while I was in Pristina, it's like, oh gosh, I probably need to apply for a real job now, because this isn't going to last forever. So I did all the kind of Indeed, and there was not so many kind of graduate jobs. So I went on the University of Exeter's website, and they run graduate business partnership schemes, where they partner with local businesses to provide experience, but also employment for people, which was, a fantastic thing to find. And I applied to be the project assistant on the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So just the Homes for Ukraine scheme, just working with Ukrainian refugees. At that time, East Devon District Council didn't have a resettlement team, so it was just me and one other person, effectively doing quite a lot of the admin work. The kind of support side of things was contracted out to another organisation. So my kind of superior decided to leave the project. She went back, she was on a secondment, and decided to go back to her role as an environmental health officer. And I was offered the opportunity to take on responsibility for the whole project, which was really fantastic. You don't really expect that within 6 months of being in a role, but it was a great opportunity, and of course I said yes. And I sort of supported the transfer of the support staff in-house, and then took on the management role of them. And as things started to broaden, it became clear that, we had an asylum hotel set up in our district, that we needed to get some support around. And to be honest, it was quite chaotic. And so I was offered the opportunity to be responsible for that. So my role kind of grew and grew to meet the demands on the district and on the council to kind of provide support for people who really needed it. The housing options team or the housing teams are fantastic at providing, homelessness support and things like that. But there wasn't the kind of support for the niche that resettlement is. So that was really exciting. And so kind of developing and opening up a whole department was something I really didn't expect to be doing, 12 months after, or not even 12 months, 8 months after graduating. It was quite a surreal experience, but
incredible.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I think you definitely learn that it is really good to have a supportive manager. And, my manager has been fantastic at kind of fostering my enthusiasm for the world of resettlement and actually wanting to do the right thing and make sure people have the right support. So very grateful to him. He's one of a kind, I think. Yeah, so now we're recruiting for other people. We're taking on more and more families, more and more resettlement programs. So I think now we've kind of established ourselves as a really important department, and that will continue, I hope, for a long time into the future, so that people get the right support that they need.
Amazing. And it was interesting. So you went on the University of Exeter website to find this. Do you have any links to the University of Exeter? Is it because it was a local university to where your home is?
Well, so I live in Bournemouth, but at that time when I returned back from Kosovo, I was going to live in Devon, and I thought, it's worth a try. I actually started at Exeter University the kind of first time round I did my undergraduate. I didn't get along so well there. The teaching style wasn't quite for me, and it was a long way away from home. And so I just thought, oh, let's just have a look. And some universities may do this, others may not, but it's a really good. As a council now, we use it a lot, and one of the new members of my team is going to be from effectively the role that I originally took. She is now going to be taking on, so it's good to keep your options open. You don't just have to look on Indeed if you're searching for stuff. Be a little bit clever about what you think you would like to do and where may advertise things like that.
And this is a graduate business partnership role through the Exeter University, but you don't have to be a graduate of Exeter University to take on one of those roles.
No. You can be a graduate of any uni. Yeah, which was really good. You just have to complete a different form, but that's not the end of the world. So it's designed for people who have graduated in the last 3 years or are still currently studying. So sometimes they offer like part-time roles and things like that. So definitely have a look.
You're doing something that you've, for quite a few years now, you had an interest in, which is quite unusual now to have this interest in a specific niche and then to, as a graduate, kind of get straight into that. But you've done that a lot. But how important is it for you to work in the sort of or how important is it for you to do a job that makes this sort of difference in people's lives? And is that something that's quite important, something you've always wanted?
Yeah, I am not overly money motivated, and I am not that bothered about the kind of private sector and the business, the whole we have to make money situation without knowing why you need to make money. And actually doing something that you can see, to be honest, it's not well funded, but you can see that the money goes to a good cause and it helps people is really important to kind of keep me motivated. I think if I was doing a job for a faceless corporation that doesn't really give anything back, I wouldn't feel as motivated to do as much work as I end up doing, because I think that the nice thing is with this role is we have events. So we quite often have events to bring people together. And when you attend those events and you get to speak to people, you actually get to see the hard work that you put in is coming off and doing something to help or to make people's lives better. And I think knowing that your time and effort is going towards making somebody else's life easier is really in itself motivating. And so when things are difficult, it's far easier to think, well, actually, it may be difficult for me, but think about the people I'm making their life easier. And that was I always knew I wanted to work either in the charity sector or kind of in the public sector, because you do get to see the fruits of your labour and your achievements are far more personal to you, rather than kind of, you've made £100,000 of commission or you've made a business £100,000. For me, that wasn't really what was going to kind of keep me in a role.
And what skills do you feel like you learned through your degree and your master's that are really beneficial to the role that you're doing?
Definitely subject knowledge, but that's because it's such a niche area, and kind of not knowing what resettlement is or around government policy it would make the role really, really difficult, because you do work a lot. I have bi-weekly meetings with the Home Office and stuff like that, and if you can't use their jargon back to them, they're not going to entertain the fact that you're there. So that was really important. But I think around it is learning to manage your own time, manage your own workload, because that's really important in any role that you get. Learning to communicate with people, both, sending professional emails makes a massive difference. If I get a non-professional email, I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on here? Making sure that you can communicate positively with people and just learn how to work with people is really important. So, group work sounds really annoying when you have to do it, and I completely understand that. But equally, you do have to learn to work with people you don't necessarily want to work with. And so getting those skills while you're at uni and kind of highlighting that you can do that is really important. And I luckily got the opportunity to kind of lecture when I first started this role, and then kind of encouraging people to go through the group work thing and actually to see the benefit of it longer term is definitely one of those things, like learn to work with other people and learn to communicate well and learn to manage your time.
So so a lot of those more transferable skills that you can use from your degree and take forward, they've been really useful. But actually also the subject knowledge, you said yourself, and I guess the research that you've done has all been really beneficial as well.
Yeah.
And what's next for you? Because, just chatting earlier, you said you love learning, you love education. So, what do you think might be next?
So I'm actually going travelling for 12 months, which will be fantastic.
Oh, wow.
So I leave in July.
And what's happening about your job?
So I'm just leaving it. So somebody else will take it on. But that I will have been in it for 18 months. We'll have done an awful lot. An awful lot has changed. And actually having a kind of a bit of a break and then a reset. And then I want to apply for a PhD. So having kind of a year out as a bit of a stopgap, and then going to apply for a PhD on still kind of within the same area, but also taking on all the practical experience and understanding that I've developed in the last year working in the kind of industry, if you like, I think will make the PhD seem easier, because you're not having, you've come with your own experience and your own understanding rather than having to develop that through more reading. So yeah, definitely a PhD. And then who knows, I'd quite like to work in academia. I think I'd like to be a lecturer and to do more research and more on the policy side, because that's where you make a bigger impact. if you can lobby at governments to change policies, that's better than having to work within the confines of government policy, which can be very frustrating.
Wow. So you've got, so it's all going to be changing for you very soon.
Yeah.
And where are you going traveling?
So 3 months in Europe and then New Zealand and Australia. So
amazing. Are you planning on working while you're out there, or?
Yeah. And I think it will be good. New Zealand especially has quite an open and more welcoming policy towards migrants, and they also have a lot of, they're called community development or cultural development projects, and something like that will be really interesting, just to kind of expand knowledge in other areas and to kind of not be wholly constricted to just working with refugees or just working in the area of migration is really important, because it does give you other skills to then take back into something that you're interested in. So, and to be fair, resettlement is a difficult area to work in, industry to work in, because it is very emotional, because you are working with people all the time. And so having a break from that and then going back with kind of fresh eyes will be really beneficial as well.
Amazing. Well, you sound like you've got a real interesting adventure coming up. So best of luck with that. Thank you so much. It's just been brilliant hearing your journey, especially, because it's been about a couple of years since we've worked together in the Careers Centre, sitting there having our chat. So it's lovely to see how far you've come. It's really great. And to see that the types of work that you were talking about to me in the Careers Centre as well is actually, you're doing that type of work. So it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's really great to hear.
Yeah. It's definitely something I worried about before I left uni. It's like, oh gosh, am I going to get a job that I want or would like to do, or am I going to kind of get stuck in something that I'm not that interested in? But I think if you can see your time at uni as a time to develop not just your own study skills, but also you have the time to volunteer, you do have the time to do additional pieces of work, and that is really beneficial to then set yourself up for what you do want to do, or even try things that you think, oh gosh, maybe I really definitely don't want to do that anymore. There's no process of elimination is an amazing way of finding out what you do want to do.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Well, no, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really, really lovely chatting to you. And I wish you all the best for your future travels and PhD.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. Please remember to subscribe and follow so you can keep up to date with all new episodes.